Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. We're glad that you are here. We're going to go ahead and get started. We want to be mindful of your time. We're gathered here to host this panel discussion. It's centered around when to invest in your media ministry. And so we know that we have people coming from various professions, backgrounds, whether nonprofits or church or for-profits, but we want to have this conversation. We have some specialists who are here on this morning who will help us to navigate this conversation. And I want to ask them to give us their name and what they do. And once as we get their names, we will just kind of dive into this conversation. It says that we are here from 10 o'clock to 11:30. I know we'll have at least a 30, 45-minute conversation, and we want to create some space for you all to ask your questions. We want to be able for you all to walk away from this conversation feeling like we spoke to your needs and not just up here just talking, but we want to make sure that we meet your needs. So having said that, my name is Isaac Curry, and I am a church planter. I'm in the process of planting a church in the DeSoto County area. I am a former pastor here at Hope Church, where I was here for 11 years. And so from my perspective, I will be bringing experience, real life experience as someone who is in the very beginning process, the nascent process of planning a church, and so thinking about media ministry from that perspective and when or how to do those things. And so, give us your name.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Bill Evans. I am senior pastor at First Presbyterian PCA Church up in Dyersburg, Tennessee. I'm a second career pastor. I owned an AV contracting company here in Memphis for about 15 years before I took a call to go into ministry full time. So I'm glad to be here.
We're glad that you're here. And you'll be retiring this.
I am. I'm retiring the end of this month from full-time pastoring. My father was a pastor. He used to say that pastors never retire; they just stop getting paid. So I think that may be my story.
And so you've been pastoring 26 years?
I've been about 24 years.
24 years?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, we thank you for your service, sincerely.
Thank you.
I am Doug Sobieski. I am with One Diversified. We are the largest AV and broadcast system integrator in the world. And if it's got screens and cameras and things like that, like we've done here at Hope, we do projects like that all over the world. I am the director of business value and customer finance. I don't know anything about the technology. All my job is to help our clients figure out how they're going to pay for it, to work around their budget constraints or life cycle asset management or what have you. And that's it. I'm glad to be here.
We're glad that you're here. Thank you so much.
All right, can you hear me? My name is David Brown. I'm the creative director at Brown Missionary Baptist Church in South Haven. It's not my church, just say that. But been doing that, been a part, I guess, of that ministry for about 15 years and been on staff as kind of the creative director for about 4 years and kind of oversee our production and our marketing and our communication aspects here at the church, and have been through several, I guess, projects throughout my time. So looking forward to the conversation.
And I'm Freddie Albaugh. I'm the executive pastor at Living Hope here in the Memphis area. I was serving here at Hope Church for over 10 years, along with Isaac. And the perspective I'll bring is not just, I shepherd an operation of the church, and not just staff, but you can buy the lights, but can you pay the light bill? I have to live in that tension. And so I'll bring that perspective of how do you get what you need, but also utilize it effectively.
That's great. So we have executive pastor, creative pastor, and senior pastor, and someone who is starting on the journey, and the key person who helps us to finance all those good things.
The corporate giant,
Yeah,
you
so,
know, right in the middle. I love it.
we had one more person who helps to kind of think through all of that AV stuff, but he may be in another class. But we have all the necessary people here. As we had the chance to talk before to get to know one another, and I'm excited about the conversation that these men of God bring to the table. And so the question we start out, when is it good, or when should or how should a church invest in media ministry? There's so much experience I can bring to the table from the Black, church, traditional church experience that we may get to, but I do know that you, Freddie, had a perspective that I knew I wanted to kind of come out the gate just kind of addressing, and then we can go from there, organic conversation. So let's have a conversation. When is it good for a church, or what should a church be thinking when we're thinking about investing in these things here and all of that? What are we up against?
So let's just embrace the idea that we are in a technological age.
Yep.
Technology is a value in our society. I don't know somebody will stay at a church because you have great tech, but we have found in our church experience, and we are a church of around 900 members, most people will visit us online before they visit us in person. And so as I try to work with our teams, I like some operating principles, and I like sticky statements. So there's a couple of them that I use. Number one, let's go with online. Our online presence for our core values is to drive in-person experience. We want folks to see get a realistic understanding of who we are at Living Hope Church online, but have that same experience in person. And so technology helps us do that. And that driving principle or guiding principle then helps us make critical decisions. The question I typically bring when our teams want to buy or add or enhance our technology or multimedia is the question I ask, is it a tool or a toy? Because with technology, there are a lot of ups and extras. There are a lot of additions that you can add. First of all, does it help you drive your core perspective or your core mission? Because there's a lot of things that you could do, but will you do those things? And then secondly, do you have the people, and we deal with a lot of volunteers, as I'm sure you do as well, do you have the right folks that either can be trained or can execute the equipment first day? And so that's the driving principles. Okay, our online presence, in-person experience, that's something we hold value to. Secondly, is it a tool or a toy? And if we can answer those questions, then we have a really good foundation to start a meaningful conversation and give us direction.
Say something more about the tool or a toy. Like, what are both sides of that spectrum? When we say a toy, like what are you thinking when you say, is it a toy or is it a tool?
So when I was serving here, one of the areas in our marriage and family ministry that we utilized is we had great sermons. We went through the Bible, but there were sometimes family dynamics that were never addressed but were felt needs. And so one of the tools that we used technology for was podcasts. How can we bring a Christ-centered perspective to some very specific family issues that were going on in real time? So in those areas that we were able to engage folks at Hope and beyond, and it was a tool because we could not speak of those things from the sermon or from the platform because we were being driven by the Bible. But these are also very important gospel-centered questions that people were asking that God had a lot of answers to. So the studio that Hope has in this context and our great AV personnel here, that was a tool for us to meet a mission, to engage people, and we saw in-person experience happen because of that. Because in my current situation, that would be a toy. I know based on our staff, the rhythms that we have throughout the week, our priorities, and even the size of our staff, that would be a toy. That would be something, we could do that, but we would never do that. We do it seasonally, but we don't execute on a regular basis to grow an audience that we can engage in person. So that's how I would define it, an example of how we would define the two.
No, I appreciate that. Anybody else want to jump in your perspective about just the media ministry? What does that look like at Brown Baptist? Or
I think it looks like, we see a lot, and of course I see things. It's funny because I was just looking at a TikTok thing of the new Apple announcement yesterday. I talk about toys, but we see all of these things, but what's actually going to be, I always say what's going to be the function. And I try to put things in the context of the overall mission and mission and value of the organization. And so it's this new piece of technology, it's this new piece of equipment going to further the mission of the church. A lot of times, our pastor always says we have three deficits: discipleship, delegation, and dollars. And so, especially you were talking about the Black church, those different dynamics. And so, are those things going to help us get those deficits? Do we have the capacity to do those different things, and will that grow or be a value add to the congregation and then the people? Similar to you, we also launched a couple of different podcasts and we got some equipment and got some things, and we really had to figure out what was going to be. We tried one, it kind of had no viewership. Tried another one, had no viewership. So then we said, well, let's step back before we get more equipment, before we get more programming. Let's figure out what the people actually want to hear and what will help them. And so now we have a new podcast that I think is helpful to people, not only in our church, but in the community as well. So just trying to figure out those things and asking those questions of the team. And don't be afraid to let people pour into you.
absolutely, I appreciate that. I think when I think about when to invest in the media ministry from my experience, so I was raised in ministry here at a Black Baptist church, and I had the chance to do ministry in Jackson, Tennessee, Philadelphia, Massachusetts, and North Carolina. And the same thing in each of those spaces was that technology wasn't really, or like as long as you had a television somewhere, that's cool, but the state of the art or the latest technology or cutting edge wasn't ever really a thing. And I think being on the inside, one of the issues was that there was an ignorance, and there wasn't, I don't think the pastors saw the importance or the need behind investing so much money, or what that looked like, how much money to invest. And I think in many scenarios, it was the understanding of one big lump sum. You get this technology, and then you keep this technology, and it was never like that's it, And so you're talking about getting newer technology or going back and updating that was like a no-no. It's just like you spend this one amount, this money, and that's it. But to be thinking about always keeping it up, which is a conversation I think we're having, it was more of an ignorance. I'm saying all that to say that I appreciate the tool, the toy. I think there's an ignorance in a lot of spaces of what it cost and what it would take to keep that going. Is that something that maybe you can speak to, either of you can speak to or would like to?
Yeah, if I could make a point along those lines, I grinned when you were talking about that. When you were saying, the cost to buy something and have it. The class we did early this morning at 8 o'clock, we talked about generational influence, where people that are in the world today, that are in their late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s, they've grown up in a world where they don't buy things. They pay for the use of something. They pay for, whether it's your cell phone or
Yeah.
your streaming services at home on television or your Microsoft Office subscription and those
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
Where there's a shift in mindset where 20 years ago when I got into technology finance, a server could cost $1 million or more, and companies would look, how do we come up with the capital funds to do that? Whereas now, they're looking more at how do we do it as a service or something like that. Today I Ubered here from my hotel. I'm here from out of town.
Yeah, yeah.
My daughter lives in New York City. She's got plenty of friends. They don't own cars.
Yeah.
You don't need to buy something to have something. It's the usefulness of that equipment that provides value to your organization. And today, there are so many ways to pay for a project or what have you. It boils down to getting all the stakeholders in the organization together and go, what is our wish list?
Yeah.
What do we want to accomplish? Nobody is saying, go out and buy model XYZ of some camera or something. They're saying, here's the outcome we're looking to accomplish. How do we accomplish it in terms of our cash flow? And do we want to capitalize it? Do we want to get into that mindset of being accustomed to a monthly payment, and every 3, 4, 5 years we have something that's the latest and greatest, cutting edge technology to advance what we're doing, and that's the change I've seen in the last 20 years. It's that the generational mindset of no longer feeling like you have to own everything, but you're paying more for the usefulness and what it brings to the organization. Hopefully that made sense.
Absolutely. I think you were saying something about a question, I think, from your perspective, Freddie, is that you still are on the side of we rather own something instead of renting or subscribing. What is your perspective?
Again, it goes back to that generational mindset or how you view, assets. I hate to use that kind of word. Everything in this room is a depreciating asset, meaning that once you install it, just like your car, every year, your accounting department or whoever takes care of your finances is lessening the value of those things. When it comes to cash flow and the type of technology that we like to implement at Living Hope, which is similar to this but on a smaller scale, we typically go the ownership route. And we have a couple of blessings that maybe other churches don't have. Number one, we have a great relationship with our vendor. I mean, we have a relationship with our vendor where we have open dialogue. When we're ready to upgrade, we ask them, what is this worth? What is our old equipment worth? And do you have an avenue for us to reap some benefit as we're beginning to upgrade these deals? And then we have a plan. As soon as we buy new equipment, we start saving for the next new equipment. And so it's just a different way. I mean, you could use that money that you're saving for as a subscription, or you could have it as an asset. Where we're at as a church, and again, it's a mindset, it's a perspective. That's kind of where we're at. We rather own it and have it and be able to sell it rather than having this ongoing payment. Secondly, if there ever is cash flow issues from our perspective, and COVID kind of taught us this a little bit, we don't have to fund the new equipment until we're able to do it financially. So that fund that we have can be put on pause, which is subscription, just the other side of it, probably can't. And so that's our perspective and how we deal with it from a less than 1,000-member church.
No, I appreciate that. Bill, what are you thinking as we're talking about this? Anything percolating in your mind?
Yeah, I appreciate all these brothers and what they have to say. Having been an integrator, an engineer, and a pastor, I probably have a unique perspective. As a pastor, I pick up on what you said about ignorance. That doesn't mean people are stupid about these things, just they don't understand what all we're talking about when we talk about technology. So one of my roles as a pastor and a former integrator is to educate our leadership in our church as to what it is what are we talking about? And at the bottom line for us as a church is we recognize that all technology is simply a tool for us to advance the gospel. If we see it any other way, in my perspective, we're wasting our time. That's our goal, is we want to advance the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we want to leverage technology to do that.
Yeah.
And so we got to keep that kind of at the forefront of how we think in terms of the church and how we educate the church. But too many times churches go, oh, we need a better sound system. Let's just go buy one. Or we need a better camera because this or that. When in fact, what I try to do with the churches I've served is to say, how do we bring in the technology component as a key part of our mission and vision to advance the gospel rather than some side note or afterthought or whatever, because that's what most churches do. It's an afterthought. And how are we going to pay for it? What is it we need? And so to bring it in as a key component of the mission and the vision of the church brings everybody on board to understand why is it we need this and what is it we need. And I want to also pick up on the integrator piece. To have a relationship with an integrator, a good, solid integrator is a must, because a good, solid relationship with an integrator that you trust and know, they're not going to try to sell you the newest and greatest and coolest thing out there. They're going to try to work with you to meet your needs, and they're going to try to educate you along the way. And so having that relationship with someone you trust, as a church, I have 2 integrators I trust. And they're the only 2 I'm going to ever go out to and say, I need some help with this. Because they've taken the time to build a relationship with me. And I've taken the time to build a relationship with them. And so to me, that's a win-win for us both in terms of the integrators' ability to make profit, to sell products, and us to have our needs met. So I think the key thing is going to always be, remember your goal, educate one another on what you need, have solid professional relationships out there to work with you to meet your needs.
That's a whole lot, and I appreciate that's really good, because when I hear you talking about the integrated relationship, and I hear Freddie talking about the vendor that they trust, speaking from experience, and I think more churches than not, that's where the struggle is. And for me, speaking, from the perspective of many black churches, it's one, not knowing where to begin because this is all overwhelming. And 2, it's just a history of dishonesty or being taken advantage of. So there's this lack of trust when we start talking about any loans, any big ticket items, and what we need. And so having to navigate spaces where someone comes in or comes around and they're trying to sell you something, and then you learn all these new terminologies, and then I think we sometimes can bring in past experiences, but then I think not every vendor is honest, just like not every person in the world is honest. So it's not just a shot at anybody, but I think that's where a lot of struggle is one, like, I'm not living hope, so I don't even have if I don't have a relationship with Freddie, then Freddie won't put me on with the person that they're working with. And so not everybody is fortunate to have a relationship with Freddie. And so if I'm located in South Memphis, or if I'm located in a certain part of the city, I don't know where to go to even start other than Google. And then what, from my experience, is they're going to tell you need all these things that you can't afford. And so it's just easier to just, put a camera up in the back or get some basic thing and just kind of wing it because you don't have $1 million to pay for something. So I think it's not just the ignorance. Sometimes we don't have the relationships and we don't know where to begin. And how you have your 2 relationships, I don't know how like even as a church planner, like I'm fortunate to have relationships with a Freddie You know, as we've been talking about some other matters pertaining to church planning, that it's because I'm fortunate to have a relationship with him that I know 10 other church planners who aren't in that situation. So it's like, where do we start? I think the both of you are going to say something.
I think it may be even a little bit more challenging than, because here's what a lot of churches, most churches are average size. Okay, let's say 200, 300, 400 people. They're not the Brown Baptists, they're not the Hope churches. There's going to be someone in the church who can get you a great deal and can install it for you. And they said, well, look at my car. You know, I have a great sound system in my car. And then you're going to be really disappointed, right? Or there's going to be a board of people that maybe work the current sound system and go to Google and they say, okay, we can assemble this. And even if you're building a building, architects don't get paid for sound and lights. They get paid for interior finishes and structure. And so when you're building a building and say, okay, we want to allocate X amount of dollars, oh, that should be enough. They're not experts in that area. So even if you're redesigning a space using an architect, so it's multifaceted. So I think what you can do is when you're testing out vendors, local or regional, ask for references.
That's good. No, that's practical.
And then ask to visit those locations. If they have a great relationship with that church, the church will open their doors because they've had such a great experience with the installers, with the integrators, and with the equipment. They'll say, sure, come on. If not, they can't find anybody, you might want to call somebody else. All right, so the guy in your church or the team in your church will say, hey, we can do this. You know, I found it off the back of a truck. Or an architect that says, okay, this should be enough. It probably won't be. Ask for references.
That's good. I appreciate that. That's real
I
practical.
would also say network, talk to other pastors, other tech people in churches you know. If nobody you know, ask them if they know somebody. Because you don't have to reinvent the wheel here every time. You just got to connect with a good integrator. Somebody in your network knows somebody who's an integrator, and I agree. You want to see their facility. You want to see kind of what they've done. You want to talk to people that they've built and integrated things for. It's very hard to have more than a couple of good relationships that way, but if you can cultivate 2 integrators, because churches, right, remember, whether we're financing by lease or purchasing outright, we still have to steward over God's money. This is still His money. And we want to find the best we can for the least amount of money. That's the way it works. But sometimes you have to spend more money to get what you need to advance your mission and vision of the gospel. So a lot of times churches say, what's the least we have to spend? That's really not the right question. What do we need to spend to advance our goal, to advance the gospel is the best question. And so developing by way of network a good relationship with integrators is really key. Somebody you know knows somebody who can say, hey, check this guy out or check this lady out or whatever.
That's good. Yes.
If I could jump in for a second to layer on the relationship aspect, and we talked about this in the class this morning, that it's great. You know, if you've got 2 good integrator relationships and you find the right solution, and then people think how we pay for it is just about a number. And I stressed this morning that understanding if you're not paying cash, if you're going with a lease or as a service or a financing route, having a relationship to make sure that it matches your goals is critical, because there are a lot of leasing companies and funding sources out there that don't have great reputations. And people paint themselves into a corner because they didn't understand the terms and conditions of the deal. It just so happens that's my role with Diversified as an integrator. My role is to work with customers to make sure we are aligning their technical goals with how they want to pay for it. Once, you know, just so happens to be my role. Once I talk to the finance people or whoever's making that decision and hear what their wish list is, paying cash might be the best option. If it's not, maybe it's net extended terms. Maybe it's a lease or a subscription or an as-a-service solution. But understanding the wish list for how to pay for it needs to align with the technical aspects of it. And knowing that whoever you rely on to help you get that project funded, you've got to have a good relationship with them because of the motivations of some funding sources that are out there. And that's the most fun I have in my job, is making sure that people have somebody trustworthy that's helping them fund that solution, and so that everybody's still friends at the end of the day.
Absolutely. That's good. I think another question or tension or obstacle rather that we deal with in the church, if when to build or fund or invest in the media ministry, it's getting the product is one thing, but having people to actually work it, is a whole nother thing. So what has been your experiences, and what can you speak to pastors, representatives of churches and other organizations about what you've seen works? Because you can't always hire, I don't think, all specialists to work the cameras and work all of these things. So what has worked and what works in your scenario? What would you like to see? What would you encourage anybody to do?
Yeah, in terms of technicians to actually work the systems that we have integrated and put in the church, that's always a challenge. But we don't just say we're looking for technicians. We say we're looking for ministry people. We're trying to create another ministry with our technicians, right, where they actually see themselves doing ministry, not just sitting up running a camera or running a soundboard or whatever. So we want this to be another ministry in the church, and we've been able to pull in folks that haven't done anything else in the church, and they've taken a liking to this, especially young people, our high school students. This speaks to their soul, and when we help them understand that's ministry, we get a lot of volunteers. We don't have a budget to pay technicians. We have to rely on volunteers, and so to try to present it and build it as a ministry has been our first approach. And the second piece of that is, if you put equipment up there with volunteers that don't have a lot of experience and it's beyond their ability to advance a learning curve, you're going to have problems with them. And so one of the things I love about a lot of the automated stuff, our switching equipment for cameras, our desks, is that they've got, preset and saved scenes and these things that all our guys got to do is basically press a button. So, but you've got to pay a lot more for a console like that versus, say, a traditional console. So there's a great example. You can put a traditional mixing console up there, but those things are complicated for guys that don't know. Now, the automated one's complicated too, but we can simplify that, but you got to pay more for it.
Gotcha.
That's one of those places where you will be glad you invested more money in a console for the sake of your technicians than if you went the cheap route and got something and then they're terrified to touch anything on those things. So that's kind of how we've dealt with that.
Thank you for that. David, what has been your experiences since you're in the creative arena and you're a specialist in this, but what has worked? What do you see to be a struggle, if a struggle at all, in your area?
I think one of the things, I guess going back to your question a while ago about, I've been in that spot where I felt overwhelmed by how do I find integrators and how do I find people, and on my end it's now that I've become the church's specialist, everybody's looking at you like, we need this now, and
Right.
So I think the biggest advice would be to still take time and don't be afraid to ask. I think one day I just decided, I said, let me just write down all my questions. I had 99 questions for an integrator, but he answered all, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to not know. There were a lot of things that I didn't know that I asked, and I got the answers to. That's how you become knowledgeable. So don't think that any question is dumb if you don't know. And I think, we have an all volunteer camera team, and I think one of the things that has helped us over the years with different integrators is we've brought our volunteers into those as well. And so when we are checking out equipment, checking out things, we've brought our volunteers to that as well, and make them a part of the process of
Investment.
actually, is this going to work? And we've made some decisions. There have been some things that we as a leadership team have liked that the volunteers have, and we've kind of sided with them. And so making sure that they're comfortable with the equipment and the things that we're choosing, so that we can, because they're the ones that are going to have to really carry it out. And so making sure that we have equipment that kind of can function in that way. And I think it's always a balance. You can get something that's automated, but then you're not able to customize. And so the other side of that is we bought something that was really, really automated, and the pastor wanted to do something different. And we were like, we can't. It's two things. So like you said, bringing everybody to the table and making sure you make the right decision. Like I said, the biggest thing is to kind of go slow. I can't say enough about asking questions, building a relationship with, like you said, the integrators, but also building relationship with the network of people. And sometimes I've not only built a network with people in the city, but also, people who may be removed from it. And I've called and asked them different things too. They may live out of town, and so they don't have any, skin in the game of the integrators around here, anything like that. But those network of churches kind of help as well, kind of guide, and good to bounce ideas off of and things like that. So it's definitely a challenge, and we've went through some bad integrators, and we've had some good integrators. And so, and I'll say to the lease and buy, I think it's also, you want to get the church's mentality into it. So every church finance team, I worked in a lot of different nonprofits and news stations before I came to Brown. And so everybody has their own, every finance person, the finance department has their own kind of way of doing things and culture. And so as a tech person, it's me learning that culture, learning how the finance people, just like we're educating them, sometimes I let them educate me on how they do things in order to understand like what is purchasing. So I try to let me and the finance person, we meet once a month, and that has been helpful because, and I used to just go through my list of everything that I have, and that was it. Now I kind of let her kind of educate me on some things, where we are and things like that, so I have a better understanding of how to present stuff and how we kind of do things and purchase things and how it all works. So I would say if you do have the time to do that kind of thing, build that relationship as well internally.
Great.
If I could add about that, it's often cyclical with the person who's sitting in the VP of finance chair or what have you, their mindset. We're working on something right now with a large church, fairly large church, where for years they've always purchased. They've always wanted to own equipment. They've got a new VP of finance who's come up through the organization, but they've changed their strategy. Part of it is because of the economy right now what have you, and they're figuring out a way to get some projects implemented right now and do it in a different, with a different strategy around cash flow. And it's just changed recently because they've got somebody new in that finance chair in the last few months. So it's important to talk to your team to find out what is our strategy, and then map out the economics around that.
Got you. Thank you so much for that.
And when you're looking at the utilization of certain things, I will give you some opinions. These aren't facts. If you're live streaming, it would be worth, if you can afford it, to get a contractual sound person. Because what I've noticed is our in-person experience with everybody singing is a lot different than the online experience when you only hear your front line.
Yes.
Mixing is really important on the front of house and back of house. I hate to use those terms, but that's the tech words.
Yeah.
And so if your values are to advance the gospel, the kingdom, and there is a deficit you might want to build into your budget contract labor. If you can't, then hire contract labor to do training. People who are skilled, and we live in Memphis, Tennessee. We have a rich supply of great musicians. I mean, studio quality musicians, studio quality sound and technical people. But you do not want to, especially in live stream, you do not want to go cheaper on your audio. Now on our video, because again, how our room is set up in our worship center, we could not put freestanding cameras. There was just no way. So we had to go to fixed. And so we found the best way to do that. So you also have to look at your room and not just, hey, we're building a ministry, but if this person stands here, 14 people won't be able to see. And we just cut our sanctuary size by blank. So you have to look at the room as well as you're looking for equipment. But
What kind of cameras did you say you all went to?
we have fixed cameras that you can operate remotely. They're web-based.
Got you.
But they're great. And for the size of room that we have, it does everything that we want because our online engagement is for in-person connections. We're not trying to broadcast this on television. We're trying to engage somebody online. But the audio, when we started listening to that, okay, we've got to invest a little bit more in the person running the stream because it did not reflect what was going on in the room.
Yeah,
So
that's good. That's good. Yes, sir.
Yeah, a couple of things too that you can think about with an integrator is when an integrator presents a project quotation to you, one of the things we need to be real important as a piece of that is a training piece. A lot of integrators will say, well, we'll be out the first time you use it and then you're on your own. No, you need ongoing training. You need to have a training component built into that proposal that says X number of dollars, X number of hours, we're going to train you how to use this.
See, if you don't tell me that, I don't know that. See, you just helped me. You just
Well,
helped me a
and that's
whole
the
lot.
thing is because most time you look at these quotes and you go, well, what's this $1,000 for training here? You go, well, that's so we can keep you up to date and we can give you continuing education on this product and on this system. And so the second thing, in addition to training, is, and this is something that's really important for us, is that you have a technician by name with that integrator that if you got a problem, you can text them. You can call them and say, listen, I'm struggling. I can't get my software up this morning. And they'll say, well, let me take over your computer, right? And so we've got the relationship with them and a key person that we can say, this is your technician. If you need something, you call this guy. And so that becomes a real good piece for us as a church and something I try to help people understand. When I was an integrator, it was a really important piece, and I thought it was a good sales piece to say, we're going to give you X amount of training here. We're going to get a technician that's going to be on call for you, not 24/7, but if you need something, you call this guy.
Yeah.
And so that was a key piece, training and a real relational contact with the tech at that integrator.
No, that's good. That's good. And
There's such a comfort level when you make such an investment, knowing there's somebody there to hold your hand
Yeah.
when you might not know exactly how to do something.
absolutely. That just made.
Systems are complicated at times, and the technology advances so quickly that even real high-end technicians go, I'm not sure what to do with this right here. Guys that know what they're doing. So to have an integrator there that goes, yeah, let me walk you through that real quick, and they go, oh, okay, I get it now.
If I could just give one quick story about that. We had done a project, it just so happened to be for a minor league baseball team, but it was a similar situation where a lot of the equipment was being run by interns. And the organization ended up not wanting to invest in the training and things like that. And it was a fairly significant investment. And after it was installed, they realized we didn't want to pay for the training. The interns couldn't do what they needed to do, and they're like, we want to send this back. Well, we tried to coach you on, let's add the line item of some training to make sure everyone is capable of running this instant replay solution in the stadium but it was a mistake because they focused on trying to cut out costs that they didn't think were useful when that hand holding
Well,
was
and
critical.
here's one of those great examples where you're going to have to pay more for that, but this is going to be a real value-added piece
Yeah.
to this equipment.
No, that's good. That's good. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And I was going to say, yeah, there's somebody else here. But I was going to say, definitely, and in a lot of, like you said, average size churches, and even as I've seen Brown grow over the years. So first there when a volunteer, Pastor Orr, our pastor, was making a decision. And so I think one of the things that's helpful as you look at pastors is, even if you have volunteers, but having people walk with you, even if, because he was the main finance person and buying the tech and things like that. And so, but he had some volunteers he pulled in to kind of work with the integrators and know different things and see different things. So that way you can kind of make things easier. And they can actually do, some of the legwork and things like that. And they can kind of look through, because a lot of times you may not have time to look through the whole contract, but if you have a volunteer that can look through and see that there's training hours and delegate this to that, and kind of that's how we've done it. A lot of times I have read them back and front, so I know about the training hours. And funny thing is, even we did some projects during COVID, and so we were having to do virtual trainings, but we were making sure that we some kind of way got that training. But one of the biggest thing also is looking at the support and the support level. I know we had a lot of problems right before the pandemic, actually, with our streaming. It just kept going down. It kept breaking. It just never would come on. And so we actually, the crazy thing is, we did the research and we found, and one of the things that I just wouldn't get anything that wouldn't offer Sunday support, whether we could call them. And so I just wouldn't consider anybody that wasn't going to support us on a Sunday. And it did cost a little more, but it was worth it to me, because I knew we needed to get, for the online audience and for the function, we needed to get it. And so it's crazy thing is we started the new streaming the day of the pandemic. And so, but it was a blessing because it worked the whole while. And so making sure that you, if you don't have that onboard tech person, that you are asking for those different things. And I was able to explain and educate the leadership team on, we need this extra cost because if something goes wrong, we have a backup to a backup, and it's, we have something that's going to support us.
And if you call the company, they'll say it's probably your server in this example. And they don't know. Have you tried this? And so having that on-site Sunday support person, it pays for itself, because that's when you're going to notice all your problems.
Yeah. Give us your name. Thank you, brother. Give us your name.
Yeah, sorry, I'm Joe Urkovich. I am executive pastor at High Point Church.
Absolutely. One quick question. Tell us about the culture at your church, about how do your volunteers, how do you support your media ministry, the technology? What do you try to do at High Point that helps to foster that?
Yeah, we really, and I apologize for being
No,
late.
it's okay, it's okay.
We really, we used to have a culture of thinking we have to pay everybody who's going to give multiple hours here. We've got to honor people by paying them to do that. And we realized through that process that we were kind of doing people a disservice by paying them. There's a lot of people in our body who maybe didn't know the technology that we had invested in, and we just thought, those people can't help us. Those people in our body can't work with us. They're not experts in that field, whether it's audio, video, lighting, whatever it is in production. And we started to change the way we did things. We started to say, okay, we're going to stop paying people, and we're going to start investing in our people. And so we started to give people, I think it was unique because I was in a position of video director. Mm-hmm. And so I had an 8-year-old, my oldest, who's now a senior in high school. He was 8 at the time. And I had him come to different shoots with me, and I said, well, my 8-year-old can hold a camera, you know? And those I think that just started to build a culture of, hey, let's start investing in the people right here in our organization because they're hungry for it. And not only are we investing in the next generation or even older folks that just want to have a hand in ministry, we're giving them a skill set, and they're getting a lot of joy in that. And so I see the investment in AVL, in production world. There's not just an investment of our treasures, there's actually an investment of our time and our talents as well. And we need to cultivate that in the culture of our institutions.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I appreciate that. We are now about at 11 o'clock. We wanted to create a space in case, some of our guests had some questions. We discussed a lot of things. Is there anyone out here who perhaps has a lingering question or something that you'd like to ask? There's no question too small, too great that at least we can try to address. We'd love to hear from you.
So I wanted to ask.
Give us your name.
Yes, it's Alicia McKenzie. I go to Greater Love. It's a church downtown. So I know that a lot of the churches downtown are renovating because there are a lot of churches that are like 100 years old. So you guys would know where I'm saying, coming from with this. There are a lot of people that are older. And when I say older, they're in the old mentality of, this is how we used to do things. So now I know our pastor has traveled a lot of places, and they're excited about, there's a lot of big screen TVs in churches, and this is how, you do different things. And so with him working with, our board, how do we because we work in media as well as volunteer, how do we get all of them together to be on the same page? Because he's thinking like, more on a bigger scale. And he was like, we got the money because God blessed us to be able to have that budget ready before the pandemic. But then you have others who are like, why are we doing this? Are we trying to be like this person, that person, this person? Is there going to be a value with a big screen on our church? So how do you kind of come together with that?
So if I'm understanding, I'm sure someone else probably heard something different. Thank you, first of all. Thank the both of you for being here, and thank you for your question. Are we saying that the pastor has one idea, but yet the volunteers have a different perspective? And the board who kind of has the influence or kind of want to keep things business as usual? Somewhat, but the pastor is more innovative. And the church is older. So how do we get everybody on the same page? What role can we play as volunteers and those who volunteer in the media ministry and who volunteer at the church? How can we help to get everybody on the same page? What do we do in this scenario? It's a great question. Anybody want to take a stab at that?
I'll go. I know a lot of times that's happened to me before. I'll say this: you're not alone. I'll say a lot of times, what we've tried to do. Of course, pastors go and see different conferences and things like that. It's interesting you say that because our pastor, he wanted to. Probably about a couple of weeks ago, he wanted to pull a tape he did in 2013, I think, he had went to a conference and he spoke, and so we were pulling it, and I was reminiscing because after he came back from that conference, they had an LED wall and they had a video to introduce him, and after he came back, he said, we need one of those videos and a wall and this and that, and we were all like, how are we going to do that? And some people they were like, we don't need all of that. We don't need to do all of that. That's too much. And so what I've tried to do over the years is just try to, especially like with those people you say, influence, deacons, board, elders, is try to show them as much as possible how this can be useful to us even during the pandemic, just because some people, we weren't even on social media in 2013, and everybody was like, we don't need to get on there, we don't need to get on there, but showing them the little success we do have. So when we first started a social media page, I would constantly say, oh, we've got, 2,000 followers. This person found us through, continue to show the success stories of what you're doing builds credibility. And so even our pastor didn't have a social media for a long time. Even when he got his, it's like continuing to show the story, going to the chat online, and we got a new system where people could chat during the service, showing people the success, whether it's somebody saw us, 300 miles away and they want to get baptized, showing, and sometimes it takes a little bit of research. I look at our Google reviews, I look online at the comments, but a lot of times if you can show the success of what you're doing and what your ministry is doing and what this will happen, then you'll build credibility even with those people that don't understand.
And sometimes it takes a little time, though. You got to be patient. So I think that's really, really good and practical in is showing the success stories, which that takes time. And I kind of chuckle because the blessing and the cursing of sending your pastor to any conference anywhere is that any pastor worth his salt is going to come back with some great grand ideas, and sometimes you got to let him or her just kind of settle, and see what still is present when they settle. But I can only imagine. Yes, sir.
I'll say this: every other pastor I know except me absolutely believes they know what's best for the church.
Absolutely.
And how much ought to be spent. That's most of them. But
Right.
no, we're all like that. But education for me, having been an integrator and a pastor now as well, I have to bring people along with me, whether it's technology, whether it's outreach, whatever it is, I have to bring people along with me. Otherwise, I end up doing everything myself. And that's a burnout. That's an untenable situation.
Yeah.
So I have to educate them on why it is we want and need what we have, but it has to be in line with our mission and vision. Again, it has to be in line with this primary goal to advance the gospel. If I can't say to my elder board or the congregation, if I can't say this investment we truly believe is going to advance the gospel, then I don't need to bring that thing forward at all.
I think that's something that I heard when I heard you say it the first time, which it seems very remedial, but it's very powerful in that going back to assessing your mission and your overall vision and making the investment of technology, it needs to be a part of the mission. You need to always, whatever you do, it needs to be able to point to the mission and the vision of your church. And that's something that you've been absolutely clear about, that I don't take for granted, because again, you can see TVs and you can say that looks great, and you can, your heart's probably in the right place. But you want to be able to always point back to that mission and that vision and say, this would, help us to accomplish that on a greater level. And so that's your words, and thank you for that. Yes, do we have, we really would love to hear from you, anyone. Thank you for that question from the both of you. That helps us. Yes, another question. Just raise your hand. Pastor Freddie will come to you and give us your name. Hey, listen, we
Do not
watching you
scratch
now.
your
Look,
head when
you
I have
gotta
the microphone,
you gotta,
okay?
You got to be careful how you move, So, listen, that Baptist finger, you got to be careful now.
Good afternoon. I asked a question. Good afternoon. So my name is Jennifer Wiggins, and I am a representative here from Mount Moriah East Baptist Church.
Yes.
Reverend Dr. Melvin Charles Smith is my pastor. And, he always wanted to do the TV type thing. So when the pandemic came along, the live stream became an option with the pandemic. So we started the live stream. We started on the phone. Then we went from phone to iPad. And then we decided that this was going to be a longer span, so we had to invest. So we invested in equipment, and we invested in, brought people in to kind of get us set up. So where we finding ourselves at now, we feel like, I'll say the leadership feels like that we've invested in what we need to get the live streaming where it needs to be. What we're hearing is the feedback from the other side, from those that are watching it, even in the space of now we're back, we still have members that are watching it. And throughout the transition, we found that, some things we're getting right, some things we aren't. So how do you find the balance of continuing to throw finances at fixing problems based off of feedback versus maybe what I found out with you guys is investing in the people, having the proper people in place, where we should probably train those that we've assigned to this task now, this ministry team, this media team that we've had to build out of a pandemic. Where do you find the balance of throwing the money, finding training, finding the resources to train based off of what we've invested in, trying to balance all of that and getting it right, so that the product that we're putting out is truly a product that mimics the ministry and what we're trying to exhibit out into the community, and getting the word out and not having the distractions that we find maybe in the broadcasting. So, we've got a lot of, I can't hear, the sound's terrible, the sound's terrible.
I'm so familiar with
it's
that.
all of those things that we're getting back. And we're trying to see, well, do we need to throw more money at it? Do we feel like we've got what we need? So how do you find the balance in all of that? I know I rambled along,
No,
but how,
no, I wouldn't try to repeat what you said because you were absolutely clear in the tension. I don't even have to repeat it to them. I'm sure they heard your heart and the tension, and I'm just going to turn to either Freddie or to one of these experts and just the perspective, because what you are wrestling with is not a new issue, right? It's something that they will also encounter when they get to that phase, and something that I've seen, but I'd love to hear from our friends on how would you approach,
Well, I'll tell you that the pandemic really threw everyone for a loop.
Absolutely.
And we're still playing catch up on what worked for a while, what is different now because we're gathering again. And that's hard enough to figure out. I think that communication is really paramount. And with a pastor such as myself, I've hired people to be in position to make decisions. And that doesn't mean that they just make decisions whatever way the wind blows for them. They choose that. But going back to our mission and our vision and our values that we just talked about, I think it's really important I've empowered people to make decisions when they're going to make a significant decision, because there's unclarity, or this was working and now it's not, or the sound's off, people can't hear what we're saying, When they come to me, I expect that they come to me and say, this is what's happening. I've talked to the whole team about it. We know it's an issue. We're trying to resolve it in these ways. Here's the ways we want to resolve it. This is how we want to move forward. Why? Because our mission is to do this. So our mission at our church is to make gospel-centered disciples. Hey, if no one can hear what's happening, we're not doing that, right?
Yeah.
So we've got to pivot because the technology is changing all the time, and we've had to chase a rabbit a little bit with the pandemic. So I would say that everything is based on why. Why would we make that decision? Let's have a real conversation about that. So opinions become things in the ether when we're looking at the core of why are we even here in the first place? Let's start there, and then we can unpack.
Yes, Freddie.
With the issue that you're specifically talking about, Again, we have values and guiding principles. One of our guiding principles for our worship leaders is undistracted excellence. We give you the steak, not the sizzle so much, but we don't want to create distractions for you. Very pastorally, you have to do what was just described. Behind the